Okay, this is important. A witch hunt is currently underway against those who oppose Israel's hideous assault on Gaza, who oppose the mass death and maiming of thousands of innocent people, the collective punishment, the siege, the forced removal of civilian populations, the mass destruction of civilian infrastructure, the bringing of a healthcare system to the brink of collapse. Indeed, against those who believe there will never be a lasting peace which protects both Arabs and Jews alike until there is justice for a Palestinian people who suffered the longest belligerent occupation in modern times, colonisation, the theft of their land in favour of illegal settlements, apartheid as defined by human rights organisations in Israel and the West. We could go on. Now, cancel culture, we've heard that term bandied around a lot, haven't we? And in response to this video, a lot of, I would describe the usual suspects, let's call them that, shall we, will go, hold on a minute, Owen, I thought you said cancel culture doesn't actually exist. Well, let's be clear, we've always had an attempt in rich countries to silence and intimidate those who either challenge the interests of the wealthy or who challenge the foreign policy of their establishments, or indeed both. Now, most are at least aware of McCarthyism in the United States. That was the late 40s and early 50s, at the beginning of the Cold War, in which those accused of being communists, rightly or wrongly, often they just had a progressive disposition, had their reputations and indeed lives ruined. And that helped, for example, neutralise the power of organised labour in the United States. That was actually known as the second Red Scare at the time, because the first came after Russia's October Revolution, in which we had violent police repression, arrests, mass deportations. Why do I just give that context? Because this has always happened throughout history, and it's often erased in terms of what actually happened, I suppose. Now, we often hear about cancel culture today. Often that simply refers to famous people with massive platforms getting criticised on social media, not quite the same, and then using that to claim they're being silenced, which they claim in their newspaper columns, on TV, radio, in their books, in public events. You get the picture. Now, let's talk about how those who've had the temerity to think killing innocent people is bad and that oppressed people shouldn't be oppressed, how they're being treated. Firstly, there's the tube driver who led a chant of Free Palestine when he had a tube full of pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Let's just listen to this superstar who must be protected at all costs.
Free Palestine! Hope you will have a blessed day today. Look after yourself and give a big shout out to everybody. And keep all those people in your prayers. Have a good day.
What happened there is the Sun did a front page splash screaming at him, as did various politicians, and then he got suspended from his job. That's what's happened. Well, I hope and trust his union and his fellow workers are doing everything they can to stand by him. But just a little thought experiment. Let's just think about this. Imagine he had a tube full of people protesting against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and he had chanted Free Ukraine. Well, you think they'd be outraged, do you? Do you think he'd have been suspended? We all know otherwise. That just would not have happened. Now, let's turn to another example, which frankly I find completely twisted. Michael Eisen was the editor of eLife, a prominent science journal. He's Jewish. He has Israeli family. He shared an article from the brilliant satirical website The Onion. The headline of this article was "Dying Gazans criticised for not using last words to condemn Hamas." An article which rightly damns collective punishment and how anyone speaking about the hideous loss of innocent Palestinian life has to caveat with condemnation of Hamas. Now, he retweeted it with the comment, "The Onion speaks with more courage, insight and more clarity than the leaders of every academic institution put together. I wish there was a Onion University." 10 days later, he tweeted, "I've been informed that I've been replaced as the editor-in-chief of eLife for retweeting a Onion piece that calls out indifference to the lives of Palestinian civilians." This is an absolute scandal. Let's be very clear about that. It is disgusting. It is absolutely appalling. It caused a revolt at eLife. Lara Urban was one of them. She said, "It's with great sadness I have to resign from his eLife editor and early careers advisor after her boss, of course, Michael Eisen, was fired." And she said for using his freedom of speech to stand up once again for the people who were silenced, and had a bigger statement than that. Now, here's some other outrageous examples. At the Frankfurt Book Fair, a Palestinian author, Adenia Shibli, a very celebrated author, was due to receive a prestigious award. A jury had awarded her the 2023, I'm not going to say, was it Libérateur Prix award for her novel, Minor Detail. That was cancelled, that event. It was also claimed on semaphore that it wasn't claimed, it happened. MSNBC quietly took 3 of its Muslim broadcasters off air after Hamas's attack. So a scheduled Thursday night episode of the Mehdi Hassan show on the streaming platform Peacock. Mehdi's a friend of mine. I've known him for years. He's one of the best journalists I've ever come across, and is absolutely incredible on this issue. Also, they reversed the plan for Aymer Mouhidine to fill in for Joe Reid's host, an Egyptian-American journalist who aggressively previously questioned Israeli leaders on strikes in Gaza. I'm glad to see Mehdi since been back on air, but what the hell happened there? I mean, taking off 3 Muslim anchors. Here's another example. The Israeli-British historian Avi Shlaim, who's born actually back in 1945, just before the foundation of Israel. His brilliant work challenged the official Israeli historical narrative. Benjamin Netanyahu's followers, to say the least, are not a fan of his work. His lecture on the formation of the State of Israel at Liverpool Hope University was cancelled. Here's another example. An agent at the top creative artists agency, she's called Maya Dakil, who represents the likes of Natalie Portman, Madonna and Tom Cruise, was forced to resign after expressing her fears of potential genocide. And for those who think that's hyperbolic, the United Nations has warned about the danger of genocide and called for the Palestinians to be protected from that risk. Conferences at the United States have been banned. For example, a major Palestinian campaign organisation, the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights, they had a long-standing planned event in Houston. Their main speaker, the Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she's the first woman of Palestinian descent elected to Congress, one of the first 2 Muslim women, the other, of course, being Ilhan Omar. It was cancelled after the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce pressured Hilton Hotels into cancelling it and trying to portray it as a Hamas front. Absolutely outrageous. Palestine Legal in the US have said they spoke to people being fired from their jobs for sharing social media posts or signing statements that support Palestinian human rights. On Friday, the Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Viet Tan Nguyen was supposed to speak at a major literary festival venue. The talk was abruptly called off, apparently because of an open letter he'd signed about the violence and destruction in Palestine, as well as his past, support for the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement against Israel. In Ireland, an Irish woman was sacked from her job after an Israeli tech firm for her pro-Palestinian sentiments. In Israel itself, huge repression. The courageous ultra-Orthodox journalist Israel Frey, who said Kaddish, that's the Jewish prayer for the dead, for victims both of the Hamas massacre and Palestinians being killed in Gaza. A mob turned up to his house and threw fireworks at his home, forcing him into hiding. Activists from the Jewish Arab peace movement detained just for putting up posters calling for Jewish Arab unity and peace slogans. Detentions across the country, people being fired, with even expressions of sympathy for Palestinian kids being described as sympathy for Hamas. The academic Yuri Horesh suspended from his academic job in Israel for supporting Hamas, in quotes, a total lie, no hearing, removed from the college's website for opposing the horror unleashed against Gaza. I'll have a separate interview, if it's not already up, with Yuri Horesh about his experience. You can see what's going on here, can't you? There's a deliberate and vicious attempt to silence and intimidate those who oppose a war crime being committed with the support of Western governments. That's what's happening. And this has to be fought back. It's obviously not just an attempt to suppress freedom of speech, a basic right in a democracy, and intimidate people. It is about trying to crush solidarity with Palestinian people in order that the Israeli massacre in Gaza can continue with active Western support, because they know that if they can neutralise and intimidate their opposition, then we won't build a movement to pressure our governments to cease this absolute horror. That's the point of this exercise. It's a political point. It's a political move. It's not simply vengeance. It's not an emotional spasm. It's a clear and deliberate attempt by those who support what Israel is doing to silence their opponents, to stop them being in a position to build sufficient power and pressure on their own governments to cease the crimes currently being committed and which have been committed for a very, very long time. So we have to show courage. We have to stand up for everyone who speaks out in support of the Palestinian people and who speaks out against war crimes, and those who support a just and peaceful settlement which will offer Arabs and Jews peace and security. So be aware of what's happening. Do keep sending me examples I'm going to keep coming up with examples. We've got to fight this. Everyone with a platform has to fight this. There's a responsibility to do that. But yes, all the free speech mob, all the cancel culture mob, where are they now? Not so vocal. A lot of them are just cheering this on. It was never about free speech. For a lot of these people, what they meant by free speech was the right to say things which were offensive and racist about minorities who lack a voice and suffer persecution, and then having a response to that. What we're talking about here are war crimes being committed and people being victimised because they stand against it. That's what's happening here. There is a difference. But yeah, do send me the examples in the comments box. I would love to see those comments and to try and do everything I can to raise awareness. Please like and subscribe. Do support us on patreon.com/OwenJones84 to keep the show on the road. Listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you in a bit.